You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Time to sharpen those swords. You're listening to Sabres Semantics, a hard-hitting interview and discussion show featuring players, alumni, media, and all others who have or still cover the NHL's Buffalo Sabres. With interesting stories from the past and current objective analysis, this show is sure to provide an entertaining and unique perspective for both Sabres and hockey fans alike.
Oh, brother, we are not worthy!
Exclusively on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Now, here's your host of Sabres Semantics, Brandon Caputo.
Welcome into another episode of Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Proudly brought to you by J&L Flooring. Brandon Caputo and Austin Broder with you as always to discuss the Sabres' last stretch of games, as well look ahead to their final 10 games starting tonight, and just take a look at some of the players that have really stuck out as of late. Talk about Bowen Byram a little bit. We'll get into our fan polls as well, what you guys thought out there, and much more. So guys, make sure to follow the podcast on X at Sabres Semantics. That's where all of our polls will be for the shows and every update regarding the show, and our shows are posted on there every single time as well. Thank you to those today watching us on demand on the YouTube channel, so make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell if you enjoy watching us on the video versions of the podcast every single week, I guess, on the network here. And to those listening today on your favorite on-demand audio platform, thank you very much for doing that as well. So with that said, Austin, let's get into it here. I mean, the Sabres, the last time we recorded, right after the trade deadline, got Bowen Byram, moved out a couple of pieces. They were right in the hunt there. They needed to beat the Detroit Red Wings twice and the New York Islanders. They almost did it. Then they went out west, and things obviously didn't go their way. But, you know, from our last recording, how would you kind of evaluate the way that the Sabres' last 7 games or so have gone?
Kind of only way to put it is disappointing, right? Like, such a high after beating Edmonton, Detroit, and the Islanders, bringing themselves to a chance to get within 2 points, just coming out flat against the Red Wings in probably the most pivotal game. The Western road trip was important too, obviously, don't get me wrong. We will talk about that. That was also disappointing. But realistically, you win that Detroit game. The 2-2 split in out west doesn't really hurt as much as it does. But it's kind of the same problems we've seen with the Sabres all year, right? Just straight up inconsistencies. Like the Detroit game, go out to a 1-0 lead, big game of the year, give up the lead, and could never really get it back. Then you respond with that chaotic start to that Seattle game. You end up winning 6-2. The Canucks, I know it was 3-2, but like never really a close or good game. Vancouver kind of just taking it to them. The Oilers, you're up 2-0. You end up losing 8-3. And then Calgary, same thing, like ends up 4-1 with a couple empty netters there, but just inconsistent. But realistically, like it's that Detroit loss that just kind of buried everything.
And we look at like the most recent stretch of games. I've got it up here on the video version of the podcast. You're following along there. I mean, you looked at it. They beat Detroit. They beat the Islanders, and you're like, wow. Like if they beat Detroit again on that Saturday, they're right in this thing. I believe they would have been 1 point back of Detroit if they were to win that game. And then they lost it 4-1. It was just a flat performance all around. Luukkonen's played every game but one in the last 10. I mean, they called up Devin Levi to play that game in Vancouver instead of going with Eric Comrie. And I guess I'll kind of ask you about that. Like, did you like the fact that they played Levi in that Vancouver game, knowing how pivotal that Western road trip is? They played back-to-back because they had just played Seattle the night before, but was it kind of weird to you that they called up Levi to come on that Western road trip instead of playing Eric Comrie, or was that kind of what you'd expect? Because I've been saying it all year that they don't believe in Eric Comrie clearly because they never want to start him. And now that you call up your starter from the Rochester Americans to start in his place when Luukkonen needs 1 day off.
Yeah, and I think that kind of speaks for itself. It also speaks for itself that they haven't sent him back down to Rochester since then because they have a back-to-back coming up this weekend with New Jersey and Toronto. I had no issue with it being Levi. I mean, the dude, people can say what they want, was the first goal against in the Vancouver game a little bit shaky. Yeah, but, he only gave up 2 goals. The third one was an empty netter. He played very well. Luukkonen played very well. Goaltending is not the issue. It hasn't been for a long time. Obviously, a large portion of that is because Luukkonen has been so consistent. Sucks for Comrie, but yeah, they don't really have the trust in him. And to be honest, without trying to sound too harsh, it's not like he's really given them any reason to believe that they should trust in him, which is why you've seen Luukkonen kind of just ride out the stretch here. And I think I'm not exactly sure. I obviously don't know. Like, Levi's been so crucial for Rochester. I feel like he should go back down after this weekend to help them get into the playoffs. But maybe this is a situation where they're just going to give Levi a couple more starts up here in Buffalo just for, future outlook's sake. But yeah, clearly I think it speaks volumes that he hasn't been sent down yet, because I think you're going to see him probably play Friday night against New Jersey or Saturday against Toronto too.
And, I mean, the standings, it doesn't look great for the Sabres for the final 10-game stretch here. But, I mean, when you look at it, like, how are they going to make up this much ground? Or what is the best path for them to be able to really get back into this thing if they do have any chance? I mean, you got 10 games left, and Detroit is currently, at the moment of recording this, 5 points up on them. And the Sabres have played 1 more game than Detroit, so Detroit's got that extra 1 in hand. So, I mean, when you look at this upcoming stretch of games, like, where are the possibilities where you can make up that points where they need to in order to leapfrog Detroit? Because they dug themselves a hole once again with a mediocre Western road trip and not being able to beat Detroit in that 4-point swing game. Like, in your opinion, where do you think that if they got any shot at this, slim to none at this point, where are they going to have to make it up?
Yeah, and also at the time of this recording, Detroit is currently up on Washington 2-1. That matchup playing tonight, no matter who wins, the playoff spot's going to get farther away, whether it's Washington winning and it becoming, 81 points instead of 79, or whether Detroit wins and it becomes 80 instead of 79. Like, that playoff spot's getting farther away tonight. I guess the only solace is you look at the schedule upcoming for the Sabres, and it's, Ottawa's behind them. So it's, quote unquote, a winnable game for the Sabres. And then you have New Jersey, who's ahead of them. Detroit once more, who's ahead of them. Philly, who is technically ahead of them, but like they're in a little bit of the thick of it. Like, Washington can catch Philly for third in the Metro. So I guess if you want to throw Philly into this wild card race, you got Philly. You got Washington twice, Tampa once, Dallas, Florida. Like, the schedule is, you're playing the teams that are in front of you. So if you're going to make up the ground, I guess at least that's your solace, is you do play these teams in most of your matchups. So I guess that is a good thing. But obviously it's too little too late. Making up potentially, 7-8 points with 10 games left is something that would probably take a miracle. I guess I don't know if that's too strong a word, but it feels like it would definitely be a miracle if they somehow made the playoffs.
What did you think went wrong in that Edmonton game? Like you mentioned, it was 2-0, and I know Edmonton's got a lethal offense, but we've seen, teams that have been able to beat them. They shut down that line, or they don't let them get on the power play. Like, to you, what was the biggest issue and the biggest flaw that the Sabres are going to have to fix if they do make any changes in the offseason? That I would look at that game and say, you beat Edmonton at home in the shootout technically twice, and then you go out there and you get destroyed after having a 2-0 lead. Like, where do you think was that more of just a one-game throwaway, or was that a microcosm of the whole season problems to you that came out in that Edmonton game?
I wouldn't say it's a one-game throwaway, obviously, because I think we've seen collapses like that happen with this team before. I don't know. Like, it's so hard because when you're talking about Edmonton, yeah, they are cream of the crop when it comes to their offensive power. They're an insane team to try and defend against, which Buffalo has actually done a decent enough job at keeping McDavid kind of at bay. This game, obviously, he popped off a little bit there, but that game to me was, I don't want to say the team quit in the third period, but like, obviously they gave up a little bit it kind of just snowballed. But to me, it's like that game shouldn't, like, that's where it's tough. It's like, to me, I go back to the Detroit game as the microcosm. It's like, out of conference games, they're important, obviously, because 2 points is 2 points, especially this time of year. But like, if they beat Detroit, is everyone really, I mean, everyone's upset about it because they're in the thick of a playoff race, but you can kind of brush that Edmonton game off a little bit. At least Edmonton is a high-powered offensive team, one of the best teams in the league when it comes to their offensive firepower. So, like, yeah, I can understand how that one got away from you a little bit, but it's just it's because of everything else that happened before that game kind of just sticks out. So, yeah, it was a utter collapse. Like, I felt very bad for Luukkonen at that because he's the only reason that these games have mattered down the stretch. And I said it during that loss to Detroit. I said it sucks that Luukkonen picked today to not be the elite goalie that he's been. And I wasn't blaming that loss on Luukkonen. It sucked because he's been so good and so elite. He's bailed them out for so long. That game, the team couldn't bail him out. And unfortunately, Detroit was able to get a couple past him. The Edmonton game, sure, 8 goals against, whatever. Luukkonen gave up a decent amount of goals, but like that, the team just gave up on him. Not on him, but like they gave up and left him out to dry. That's what it was. People, I think, are reading a little bit too much into it because, yes, this is the team that's going to be here next year. I don't think it's a long-term issue with this team, but I do think that it's a very good showing on, the coaching staff and how they should try and play, because I think this team is not built like Edmonton. Don't get me wrong. No one is built like Edmonton up front, but do you think Edmonton cares that game, like that they gave up 3 goals? No, they scored 8. So then that's kind of the flip side for the Sabres, is the Sabres seem this year to be stressing they don't want to give up a lot of goals. Who cares if you give up 3 goals if you score 8? I think that's the mentality the Sabres should have, and that's just not the mentality that they have right now this year, and I don't really know why.
I found it odd that, I know this is kind of off topic from what you just talked about there, but they had 2 days off in between Edmonton and Calgary. Like, I'm sure they loved the fact that they had 2 days off in Edmonton and Calgary in the middle of March. This wasn't like they got 2 days off in Vegas or Arizona or Florida. They had 2 days off in between Edmonton and Calgary, so I'm sure they had a lot of fun with that. But I guess where I'm getting to that is, are you okay with Luukkonen playing as much? Because we had talked about this in the trade deadline, if they were going to pick up a veteran goalie and they sent Levi down, and they obviously called him back out for that one game. But if Luukkonen's getting 90 to 95% of the starts down the stretch, do you think that that's okay for him? Do you think that he might end up slowing down at some point? Or do you think that he's shown with the workload that he's had this year, with their inability to allow Comrie to get in the net like a normal backup would every 2 of 3? Like, are you okay with Luukkonen just getting the bulk of the starts for the rest of the year? You got 10 games left. He starts, 9 of them maybe, because they have that back-to-back coming up. Maybe they get Levi in there. Maybe Comrie doesn't even play another game for the Sabres. But regardless, like, Luukkonen's workload, is that something that's an issue to you?
No, not at all. And as crazy as it sounds, look at the way he played against Calgary, right? He bounced back immediately. He's been the model of consistency lately. I have no issue playing him down the stretch, running him like the workhorse that he's shown that he can be. I think Levi gets at least one more start if he stays up here. Like, the backup is definitely, whether it's Levi or Comrie, someone is splitting the back-to-back up this upcoming weekend. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind there. So if Luukkonen gets 8 or 9 more of these last 10 starts, I think that's all right. He's earned that right. The more data you have on him as the Sabres front office, the better. The bigger the sample size, the better. The more confident you can feel in him. So, I have no reason. He's earned it. Unless he comes to you and says he wants a break, which I don't see that happening. I say you just ride him out.
And we'll look at the player stats real quick. Dahlin leading the way with 52 points in the 71 games. Alex Tuch is now second on the team, with Casey Middlestat being moved to the Colorado Avalanche. So Tuch's second on the team in points. Jeff Skinner, who's kind of moved up and down the lineup a little bit, and Tage Thompson, again, 45 points is a far cry from his 94 last season, going through that wrist injury that he just really hasn't been able to really break through. But JJ Peterka, I think, is the guy that stuck out to me as of late, Austin, and they've put him up on that top line with Tuch and Thompson and on the top power play unit, and he just continues. Other than Luukkonen, to me, JJ Peterka has been the bright breakout player for the Sabres this year. With the amount of goals that he's put up this year, 24 goals, which technically is the tied for the team lead with Jeff Skinner. But he just seems like he can be a guy that maybe what Victor Olofsson they hoped it would turn into, like a guy that they could trust in the power play, the trigger man. But Peterka's just got so much more consistency, and I think he's shown that he's valuable in other areas, not just goal scoring, like unfortunately Victor Olofsson has kind of fell into. But number 77 for the Sabres for me, like just every time I watch him, he just continues to get better. And we saw that goal against Calgary with 10 minutes left, how big of a goal that was, the game-winning goal, getting the pass out in front, and just being able to capitalize on the timely opportunities that he does get.
Yeah, he's really been one of the brighter spots. Obviously, he's had some cold stretches. He's had some stretches where, he went a while without some goals and things like that. But,
right.
24 goals for him, extremely good. Obviously been one of the brighter spots for this team. Offensively, he only had a couple games on that top line. It kind of looks like he's back with Quinn and Cousins, which has also been one of their more effective lines. So obviously there is no slight in that whatsoever. But it's good to see him get rewarded with that opportunity and succeed. The other guys, we'll have plenty of time to discuss that over the offseason. There's been some people who've regressed with their offense, but it is good to see JJ kind of taking that step forward. And it really is unfortunate that Jack Quinn had so many injuries, because I also think if he was healthy, we'd be talking about a similar season. Him and Peterka probably putting up similar numbers. Maybe Peterka's numbers are even better if Quinn's healthy all year, because we know how good that those two are with each other.
And thoughts on Greenway real quick, because I know you've been, pleased with the way that he's been, I guess, a versatile player up and down the lineup, and what he brings as a big body. And, how have you thought that Greenway's kind of fit in as of late, ever since the trade deadline came and passed?
Yeah, so I think Greenway brings a lot to this team that they don't have. He's good, big body, two-way forward. I really like it. But this isn't a slight on Greenway at all. The lines came out, the kid lines back together. Greenway slotted up with Tage and Tuck. At least that's what it looked like at practice yesterday. It's
Greenway, Thompson, Tuck right now, according to Daily Faceoff.
Yeah, that's how it looked like at practice. So my problem is he's just not he shouldn't be on the top line, and that's not a slight on Jordan Greenway at all. That's a slight on the coaching staff. And I think the bigger overarching theme with this coaching staff is certain players just not knowing how to use them. Now, I don't think Jeff Skinner is also necessarily a run and gun top line player, but why not throw that line back together, the kid line back together, and then let Krebs, Benson, and Greenway be your third line, checking line? I just think the coaching staff has certain players where they just don't know how to use them properly. And that's, every coaching staff has that, where they try and pigeonhole certain players into roles that they don't fit. Every coach has blind spots. I get it. But it's not fair to Greenway to throw him on a top line role, because that's not exactly what he's made for. Every time he plays, every time he gets slotted on that third line checking role where he's, he can contribute some offense. We've seen him. He's got 24 points this year. Totally fine for a bottom six player. But it just seems like every time he starts to get going and he's playing in the role that he's supposed to be in, for whatever reason, this coaching staff tries to throw him up on the top line. And it's not necessarily fair to him, because he's not necessarily the top line player. I do understand, there's a time that Girgensons was playing with Tage and Tuck and they look good together, but I don't know. Good for Greenway. I do like it. I do think that he's a player that they should keep on here, because his skill set is something that the Sabres team is lacking. So I do like Greenway, and I do like that he's played this year. I just had to get that out there, because I just think the coaching staff here grossly tries to misuse him.
Thoughts on Jack Quinn, because it's most likely he's going to play tonight, and if he doesn't, he's probably going to play over the weekend, but it looks like he is going to play tonight. So barring any kind of setback, 12 points in 17 games for Jack Quinn, has been on the shelf 2 separate times this year, and we really haven't got to see what his full potential is, obviously, with him missing so many games. But just, especially with them trading away Casey Middlestat, to add a guy like Jack Quinn back to the forward group, does that excite you? Is there any way that could, put them over the top? Again, it's going to be hard to overcome at this point, but could you see them playing better down the stretch with number 22 in the lineup?
Oh, yeah, no doubt they'll play better with him in the lineup, because he's a very good player. I think the argument's sake here is, the season is pretty much all but lost. Should they shut him down, or should they let him play? I can see arguments for both sides. I've heard people say, they should just shut him down for the rest of the season, let him rest up. I can totally understand why someone would have that mentality. But I do think this team wants to see what they have when, the current forward, like you said, they just lost Casey Middlestat. They haven't really had their full, stable of forwards available to them. They do now with if Quinn is healthy and is going to play tonight or he's going to play this weekend. Maybe it's just a chance for them to evaluate where these guys are at and maybe what holes they might be, needing to address coming into the offseason. So I do think he should play if he's ready. Obviously, he seems like he's ready. So I'm looking forward to having him back in the lineup because he's a good player and it kind of is evaluation mode here. But also, the team does play better with him in the lineup. So if they do desperately need results, getting one of your better players back certainly doesn't help. Or it certainly doesn't hurt.
Absolutely. So we're going to get more on the part 2 of today's episode. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to get our polls. We're going to talk about the defense a little bit, and we'll kind of look ahead of what we're expecting the next week or so with this team and just kind of wrapping up the last 10 games of the season, trying to make themselves play meaningful games at the end of the season once again. So stay right here. We're right back on Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, proudly brought to you by J&L Flooring.
J&L Flooring is Niagara's specialty flooring and design company. They take great pride and provide elite customer service and support. With a beautiful showroom, great pricing, and a wide variety of truly unique products, J&L Flooring is your specialty flooring and decor boutique shop. All of their products are environmentally friendly and responsibly produced so you can feel good about your flooring choices. Their goal is to build authentic relationships based on honesty and integrity that they foster with respect and authenticity. Offering a unique and wide range of quality products presented by a knowledgeable and patient team, they simplify the process to make your life easier and to make your home more beautiful. Visit them at 4424 Montrose Road in Niagara Falls or find out more at jnlflooring.com. If you think you can get a better deal anywhere else, you don't know Jack at J&L Flooring. In the Niagara region, Global Pet Foods is your destination for premium pet nutrition and caring expertise. Whether you've welcomed a new furry family member or need advice on top quality nutrition, their dedicated staff is ready to help. Discover why Global Pet Foods' lesser-known premium brands outshine the big corporate names. Their team's passion ensures your pet's health and vitality. Check out one of their locations today, 3643 Portage Road in Niagara Falls, 160 Highway 20 in Font Hill, or 400 Scott Street and 344 Glendale Avenue in St. Catharines. Global Pet Foods, where premium brands and caring staff make the difference.
Niagara Golf Lounge features 2 state-of-the-art indoor golf simulators, allowing you to play some of the world's best courses all year round. The perfect place to indulge all season long. Don't worry about getting thirsty while you play around with your friends. Their fully stocked bar offers a wide selection of drinks, appetizers, and a variety of meals are also available to enjoy before, during, or after you play. Grab a seat next to the fire in their comfortable sports lounge. Didn't bring your clubs? No problem. They have partnered with TaylorMade to offer you the best rental clubs. You won't want to miss their exclusive NFL and NHL giveaways for the Buffalo Sabres and Buffalo Bills. Located in the Best Western Plus Karen Croft Hotel, 6400 Lundy's Lane in Niagara Falls. Visit NiagaraGolfVacations.com to learn more and to reserve your golf bay today. The Niagara Golf Lounge, Niagara's home for golf and sport all year round.
Are you looking to hire? Let the Niagara Employment Help Center save you valuable time and money by making your hiring process easier. Their services include free job postings in-house and on their website, fill job vacancies quickly and efficiently, access to a bank of potential employees, reduce employment costs, and financial incentives may be available to offset the cost of new hire training. Check out the website at ehc.on.ca or call 905-358-0021 for more information. The Niagara Employment Help Center, helping people find work since 1983. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Hey, hey, here we go, it's hockey night in Buffalo. Hey, hey, here we go, the boys in blue, white, and gold. Hey, hey, here we go, make some noise, get in the zone. All for one and one for all, let's hear you from your heart and soul. And we will stand, raising our hands, saying, let's go, Buffalo.
Welcome back to part 2 of today's Sabres Semantics episode. Brandon Caputo and Austin Broder back with you. Guys, make sure to follow the podcast on X at Sabres Semantics for all of our Sabres content. As well, we're available on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts if you're into that video type of content. We try to clip up the episodes for you guys and a little bit of the discussion that we have on the show. Thank you to those today listening on demand on your favorite audio platform, and to those watching our beautiful faces on demand on the video version of the podcast on YouTube. To make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell for all updates on video versions of our podcast that get released here on the network. So with that said, we're going to continue on here with our Twitter polls today. And again, thank you to everybody for participating in our fan polls. Make sure to go to our Twitter account where we post polls for all of our episodes. First poll today, this one was the one I came up with. How pleased have you been with the play of recently acquired defenseman Boehm Byram with the Sabres, acquiring him at the trade deadline from the Colorado Avalanche for Casey Middlestat? Very pleased, pleasantly surprised, indifferent, and disappointed. I'm glad that the first two were the highest, and pleasantly surprised and very pleased. 0% for indifferent and 0% for disappointed, which is great to see that there are no goons out there that think that Boehm Byram has played horrible. Austin, we've seen him play on the offhand, which was something that people were wondering, was he going to be okay with that? Seems like he's been okay with it. Playing with Rasmus Dahlin. He's played up on the top power play as well at times. What have you liked from Boehm Byram since he's come over from the Colorado Avalanche? He obviously put up a couple of goals in his first two games and passed the eye test. This is a guy that's only 22 years old, but he's already played many years in the National Hockey League, and he's won a Stanley Cup. So for them to get a guy at this stage of his career that has very good experience already, I think he's just added a little bit of a swagger and a little bit of something that the Sabres don't have from their other young players that they've obviously drafted and haven't even made the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm not going to say pleasantly surprised. I know he's a very good hockey player. He's been pretty solid. He's played some big minutes. He's playing with Dahlin. They kind of read off each other, and you can see like when they're clicking, they are aggressive, high event offensive hockey. They're both pushing the pace of play from that back end. They are both being aggressive with their pinches. They're both active in the offensive zone, so that's a good thing. I have seen, not a lot. I've seen some people talk about how his defense has struggled and all that, blah, blah, blah. And yes, I do think, he's an offensive defenseman. Is his defense an area that he can improve in? Of course, but if you really think about it, everyone on the Sabres can improve on their defense. That's kind of been the overarching theme all year. That's all I've heard the coaching staff talk about. So is Byram perfect? No, but he's very talented. He's brought a lot to this back end. He's really, really, he's made it so that, not now that, people are healthy, we're seeing, he switched up the power play and Byram's no longer on that top unit with Dahlin, but he's on the second unit with power. And I think Byram being on the power play is something that could make this power play a lot better going forward once he's got a full offseason to acclimate and all that stuff. Because, yes, he's a defenseman, but you watch him on the power play, he's a jitterbug. He's constantly moving around the offensive zone. He's communicating. He's trying to get people to not be stagnant, which I think is one of the biggest issues with the Sabres power play. I like him. I think he's going to be a really big part of this team's future. They have some – once they kind of figure out who that fourth defenseman is in their top four, whether it's Samuelsson or whether it's Jokiharju or whether they – get somebody else. I don't know, but they're building this team from the back end. They're building this team to have aggressive, offensive-minded players who like to attack and push the pace of play from the back end, and I think that's a good thing. So, yes, it hurts the forward depth that Middlestat's gone, but it really shored up that defense. And has it been perfect? No, but you can see the flashes of what makes Boehm Byram such a good player, and just the straight-up fact that he can log big minutes with Dahlin. You're not throwing like. You normally used to see Dahlin rotate and go play with power every odd shift or something like that. You now can kind of see that this coaching staff says, all right, if Dahlin needs a quick break, Byram can go through and play with power for a shift here. They kind of have two guys that they can kind of trust as a workhorse, and they're going to start using Owen Power in that same way. So they're going to have three defensemen who could basically be used as a workhorse on the back end. To me, that is a good thing for this team's future. And I think, as this team gets better, you're going to see their defense as big contributors at both ends of the ice, which you're kind of already seeing. Like Byram's got double-digit goals on the year, so does Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power. people talk about him. He's for some reason, the good players on this team are always the reasons. Like, they're always the controversial characters here in Buffalo. But Owen Power has room for improvement, of course. But when he's on the ice, the team scores a hell of a lot more than they get scored on. So I like what they're doing here. And I think Bowen Byram has been maybe not necessarily as advertised, because it all depends on what you thought of him, but I think he's been extremely good.
And I think something you have to take into account, too, is that he's coming from a team and he's had to adjust. Comes from a team in Colorado where, they have a solid structure there. They got Cale Makar, the way that they play, the high tempo. And I think you even mentioned it maybe in the first couple of games. You posted a tweet or something like that about how Byram just had to adjust to the way the Sabres' stagnant power play has been. Like, you see him wanting to push the pace and be able to move around, and the Sabres are just kind of standing still, trying to hit Tage Thompson for that one-timer. And I think he's brought some life and spark to that defensive side, and being able to push the puck up the ice and bring a little bit of a different dynamic to the offense, coming from a place like Colorado that has such a lethal offense in the National Hockey League. I think that's been a good injection from Bowen Byram, of just the guys seeing look at what he was doing with this team, and look at how obviously successful they've been. So I think that's been good too, not just what he's brought on the ice, but maybe his mentality and the way that he's been developed by the Avalanche on what it takes to be a defenseman in this league.
Yeah, and you can just tell, like, again, whether it's Adams telling Granato he wants to see Byram in different situations, or whether it's just Granato trusted him immediately that much. Byram has been power play, even strength, and penalty kill. He's been a huge part of the Sabres, like, ice time. So clearly this coaching staff sees something in him. Clearly Kevin Adams saw something in him. If you watch the guy play in Colorado, you see what they saw in him, because he has a lot of talent. He was a high draft pick for a reason. And I really do think that, it sucks to keep talking about the future, but I do really like that at least 3 of the top 4 defense that the Sabres will have likely for a long time to come, because you don't trade Middlestat for Byram if you don't see him as, a key piece here for the long term. And yeah, is he the bone crushing stay home defenseman that, a lot of these people in the Buffalo want? No, but he's a damn good hockey player, and he's going to be a really, really big part of this team going forward. And like you said, he's already won a cup. He's done it before. Is he necessarily going to do it here in Buffalo? That obviously remains to be seen, but he knows what it takes to get it done, and he's a heck of a talent. So, yeah, I really like what I've seen from him through these 9 games. There's still 10 more to go. I think he's going to, be a big part of this team, and anyone who can, take pressure off Rasmus Dahlin, because it feels like him and Power were kind of basically had to carry play from the defense here and log huge minutes. And obviously that's what you do when you're a number 1 and number 2 defenseman. But anytime you can get someone who's almost equally as talented on that same level, who can log those big minutes and make their lives easier, I'm all for that.
And I mean, the D pairs, as far as the time of recording this, they got Byram with Dahlin, Power and Yoki Haru, Bryson and Cale Clegg. And you'd think that if moving forward, I mean, we can talk about this in the offseason, but Samuelsson will be back. He's out for the year. Your boy Ryan Johnson's in the American Hockey League, and we've seen him come up and have flashes. And then the coaching staff just deciding to play Eric Johnson over him for whatever reason. But like you see how bright this D-core is going to be in the future, and people can say what they want, that they don't, like you mentioned, have like a big bruising guy back there. But I think the amount of skill and the amount of two-way defensemen that they do have, they aren't just they don't just have 6 offensive guys that can't play any defense. Like, they've got guys that are solid two-way defensemen that bring more of an offensive game, but it's not like their defense is horrible. So I think that it's rounding out well, and obviously Byram's going to need a contract extension coming up here soon. So see how that kind of works, if he's a good fit or not. But I've liked what I've seen so far from Byram, and I like the pairing of him and Dahlin. And again, there's growing pains, obviously, with that. But I think if those two are your guys that are logging the 26, 27 minutes a night, like, I think the Sabres are in a good spot going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Samuelsson next year will be the key. Will Granato revert back to his old ways of pigeonholing him and Dahlin as a pair? And then I guess in that case, your second pair would be Byram and Power, who I think would work well together, because I think Byram, he feeds well off Dahlin. Power plays a similar style to Dahlin, so I think there's a good fit there. Me personally, Samuelsson, I like Samuelsson a lot. He's a third pair defenseman. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. I don't think that is a slight on him at all. I think if you have Darlene, Byram, Power, insert name here, whether it's Yoki Haru or they go get someone else, I don't know, and then Clifton and Samuelson, I think you're looking at a pretty decent defensive group there. But it'll be interesting to see what happens when Samuelson comes back next year. But all in all, they have the solid foundation from the back end. They already had that before the Byram trade because, you have Darlene and Power. You can build a strong D group, but just adding Byram to that mix was a really nice addition. And I think the Sabres blue line will be a big reason why they will be successful going forward.
How about that empty netter from Connor Clifton from behind his own net with 1.1 seconds left? Shoots it all the way down and gets that goal against Calgary. That one caught me off guard, but good for him, I guess.
Yeah, Clifton is one of the most frustrating players because I get why people hate when he's on the ice because he's so chaotic and whatever. But I think he's really steadied out a bit more as of late, and you'll see some. You'll see some flashes of some of the most brilliant play you've ever seen from a defenseman, but then, he'll flip it around and make one of the most honestly, Rasmus Ristolainen, except for Connor Clifton's not a top defenseman. He's being played on the third pair. So I kind of equated to that, but it's a little bit more tolerable for me because Clifton's your third pair defenseman and he does flash every now and then. So I'm kind of okay with it.
Move on to our second poll today. And Austin, you came up with this one. So what do you hope the Sabres will do in their final 10-game stretch of the season? Win for momentum next year or lose and force big changes in the offseason? Win to gain momentum next year was 80% on this poll.
Good.
So, I mean, I know you've been critical of certain areas of the coaching staff this year and whether or not they're the right ones to take them to the next level with this group. But with getting Jack Quinn back healthy and Bowen Byram finishing off strong, Luukkonen, I guess in the last 10 games, are you okay with them, trying to gain, let's say they win 8 of their next 10, and then they come back with the exact same coaching staff, the exact same group, they don't make any big changes, or are you kind of hoping that they struggle down the stretch and they might think twice in the offseason and maybe make a change or two?
So I want them to win. I want them to win and build momentum. Whatever. Momentum doesn't necessarily carry over into the next year. I'm not necessarily a believer in that. But I want them to win. I want the games to be entertaining because I'm watching that. I do, however, think that there is no reason this exact same coaching staff should be back next year unless they somehow turn this around and make the playoffs. I do think that Granato is all but cemented back to start here next year. Now, whether or not he'll be on the hot seat or have a short lease next year remains to be seen, but I think it's pretty much 99.9% certain he is the head coach to start next year. I do think, however, the organization and Granato should get together and can all of the assistants. Special teams has been atrocious. The power play is the reason you are not in the playoffs this year. Sabres are actually a relatively okay 5-on-5 team this year. They have a positive goal differential at 5-on-5. They're having one of their best 5-on-5 seasons in the last decade. The power play is abysmal. Penalty kill started out hot. Is not that good anymore. It's not terrible, but it's not good. The penalty kill is essentially hope Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen stops all the shots. That's penalty kill. Sorry, that's basically what their penalty kill is. It's basically what their penalty kill has been most of the year. They have Tuck and Greenway and Thompson, the bigger guys up top, causing some traffic there, and then it's just hope the goaltender makes the save. So I do think that while Granato is here next year to at least start the season, there is no reason that changes to the coaching staff should not be made. I don't think any amount of wins throughout the rest of the year will change my mind there. I don't even think that making the playoffs would change my mind that something needs to change behind that bench. So I'm okay with them winning. I want them to win. But I do understand if people want to see them lose to try and force a change because I think a change needs to be made, not necessarily the head coach.
That's fair. I think that you can't come back with everybody in place next year from top to bottom. There's got to be some sort of turnover, whether it's a bottom 6 player, whether it's an assistant coach. I think just something has to be different because we've obviously seen that this group has spurts, but they're clearly not good enough. And until they accept that they're not good enough, are things going to change? Probably not. But you would hope that Adams and the rest of the front office would say, okay, yeah, we keep preaching that we believe in this group, and they've said that from the beginning of the year, and halfway through the year, trade deadline came and passed. They made a couple of moves, but for the most part, they believe in this group, but at what point is it just not working anymore? Because this will be three or so years with this same group for the most part, the same core group of guys. And if you want to get to that next level, something in there has to be tweaked.
Something has to be tweaked. Roster wise, yeah, I think you need to change out two. You need to add at least two forwards. Whether they need, like, I'm not necessarily saying they need to add a superstar. I would love it if they did, if they were aggressive and did something, but they need to at least bring in some additions. And I think just the coaching staff needs new voices. Granato needs somebody. Granato is a very good developmental coach. He's really good at getting, people to buy into what he wants to do, all that stuff. But it hasn't worked. People took a step back this year. Not necessarily Granato's fault, but again, as everyone knows, it's a lot easier to change coaches than it is to change over an entire roster. I do think that this roster has enough talent to be a playoff team. I do think the issues with the power play are not a talent issue. I think that is a coaching and systematic issue. I do think that the coaching staff does not know how to adjust in game. I do think that they have too many blind spots and try to pigeonhole certain people into wrong roles. I do think the wrong players get forced into lesser roles that they should be. I do think that this coaching staff struggles with X's and O's, for lack of better words. So, whether it's firing your assistants and bringing in someone to put a little bit of pressure on Granato, right? Like you bring in a former NHL head coach as the assistant who could maybe be the head coach in waiting in case things go wrong. Maybe nudge Granato and say, hey, like, you're here, but we need to see a hell of a lot more before we can feel comfortable moving on with it, right? I don't know exactly what it is. And I don't necessarily think trading Middlestat was a message to the roster saying this wasn't good enough. I think it was a hockey trade that presented itself, and it's going to work out good for both teams involved. But I do think maybe Adams also needs to get a little bit more aggressive and send a message being like, look, I'm not expecting career years from all these guys every single year. Like I said at the start of the year, I think Tage Thompson is more of a 75-point guy. You don't think he's necessarily the 95-point guy that he was last year. That's his career high. But if he can settle into that 75-point range, I think that's a good thing. Obviously, he's regressed a little bit less than that. But to me, it's just something isn't working, and there is absolutely no way Adams can come back and just run it back. Whether that's the coaching staff or major changes to the roster, I would prefer both. But I at least need to see one of them to just know that, okay, the organization knows what happened is unacceptable, because this year is unacceptable. We all said if they had good goaltending, they'd be a playoff team. Guess what? You got good goaltending. You're not even close to a playoff team. So something's got to change.
Yeah, it was role reversal essentially from what we thought. So yeah, this team continues to puzzle us. But we'll move on to the last poll. Which Sabres forward do you think needs to have the strongest end of their season? Maybe which, again, there's a few guys here that have disappointed and a few guys, well, one of them really that I think, just given a bigger role and wants to prove himself going into next year. So Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, Alex Tuch, and Peyton Krebs. Tage Thompson, probably to nobody's shock by the general public, won this poll just for the reasons you had mentioned earlier. Their last second was 93 points to, being a guy that might not even hit 75 this year. Like, obviously, people are going to look at that and say, oh, he's had a terrible year, and yeah, he had the injury. But you want to see him have a good finish to the year. I think Dylan Cousins is another guy that regressed as far as his point total. Alex Tuch, I put him on there just for the fact that he's the guy that's going to have 1 year left on his contract. So, really, like, what are they going to do with him moving forward if they don't give him the captaincy? I mean, that would be a guy that you'd look at that might wear the C, but is he going to be here long term? That's remain to be seen. And Peyton Krebs, I think I put him on there just, as I mentioned, for the fact that he's gotten a bigger role now with the team. He's moved up to the third line center. He was fourth line center for most of the year, but now he's kind of taken that middle stat role of being the guy that can move up and down as the utility guy. So I guess just general thoughts on those four guys. I mean, we've talked about them a lot already, but I mean, who would you like to see kind of have the best finish to the season out of those four?
Oh, to me, it's my guy, Peyton Krebs. I think Peyton Krebs needs to have a strong last 10 games here because he's now the third line center. I do think he's talented enough to produce in that role. I think he's smart enough to produce in that role. I do think he is a player who can put up 35, 40 points as a third line center. He's gifted enough to do it. He needs to show that he can do it because now he's given the role. Just touching quickly on Tage and Cousins, I think Tuck will be fine. He's still, he's playing well. Again, it's not fair to expect these guys to produce at career rates every single year. It's just not possible. To me, it's obviously Krebs, and then I think Cousins would be second for me. Whether people want to hear this, I know Tage is become a lightning rod this year. I know some people are freaking out about him. He's dealt with a lot of injuries this year. People are talking about his contract. First of all, right now he's producing at over an 82-game season. If he played all 82 games, he's still producing at a 60-point pace this year. Is that fantastic? No, but if you're telling me that Tage Thompson's down year is 60 points, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with signing up for a 60-point season for Tage if that's a down year for him. Like I said, I think for the $7-ish million that he's making, as long as he's in that 70, 75-point range, I'm happy. He's at 60, and he's dealt with a lot of injuries. To me, it's Dylan Cousins. Because Dylan Cousins is a guy who I think can consistently score 30 goals in this league and put up 60 points. He does not, neither does Tage. Tage does not look like the player that we've seen the last couple of years. But I think there's more reasons to point to that for Tage. To me, Cousins has been so up and down this year. We've seen flashes where he's been the player from last year where he's attacking with speed, he's being aggressive, he's using his shot. To me, he's the one that needs to step up because he looked like himself over, for a couple stretches here and there. He did have some injury problems earlier in the year. I know there's that whole thing that happened, with the Flyers game and dealing with the face shield. He was obviously not himself for some other reasons beyond his control, but to me, he is the guy. If Tage is going to be that 70, if you can get Cousins and Tage to both be around that 70-point thing as your top two centers, I think you're happy with that. Tage, we've at least, again, he's producing at a 60-point pace. So, if that's his down year, I'm okay with it. Cousins, to me, needs to be more because I think Dylan Cousins has the potential to be so much better than what he's shown. And I do think, some people have equated it to, he misses Jack Quinn. I do think he misses Jack Quinn. I think this whole entire team misses Jack Quinn. But Dylan Cousins needs to show that he can produce away from a player like Jack Quinn. Otherwise, it's not going to bode well for him because your second-line center should not be the result of Jack Quinn. No disrespect to Jack Quinn. I think Jack Quinn's a top 6 scoring winger. I think he's going to score 30 goals in this league for a long time. But to me, Cousins should be the one driving that line. And I think we've seen flashes from it, just not nearly enough. And I don't think he has the injury problems this year that people can equate to Tage. So I'll give Tage a little bit more rope on this one. I think Cousins was the guy. And as long as, if he shows that he is somewhat himself over these last 10 games, I think that'll be a big sigh of relief for the fans and just for Cousins in general because he's so much better than this. And I will preface this by saying I am not worried about those two. I do think you'll see a bounce back the year. I think people are it was the worst possible scenario to have Cousins, Tuck, and Tage all come off career years and regress because the odds are all three of them were going to regress and not have a career year again because that's how hockey works.
And I guess a side point here is I know he was a pending RFA. Do you think them moving Middlestat was somewhat of a message to the rest of the forward group? Like, okay, you guys need to step up now. Like, we just traded the guy that was leading our team in points for forwards. I know that there was the underlying contract issue. But do you think that might help galvanize the group to say, okay, now, Casey's gone. We have to step it up here. He was one of our best forwards. Now the rest of us have to kind of pick up the slack and just play better in general. Like, do you think that there was any sort of positive that could come out of them trading Middlestat to hopefully free up these other guys to say, okay, we need to get back to what we're used to and, not to have such a year that had so much regression in it for so many of their top guys.
I think maybe you could see some of the players say, we got to play better because he's gone, and they have said that. But to me, the positive with trading Middlestat was the GM wasn't going to just run back the same thing. As good as Middlestat was, he probably did earn a contract extension here, to be honest. But you got Bowen Bryman, who's a good player, so you got another nice long-term piece there. But to me, it was just, and I said this before on the pod, if they sign Middlestat long-term, that's it. Your top 9 forward group is locked down for a long time. And if they're not good enough, you're screwing yourself. Like, no doubt about it now. Middlestat is very good. But now at least it opens up a spot on this roster, right? If Krebs takes it and runs with it, the Sabres are happy. If not, they say, okay, you know what? We now have an opening that we need to go and address. And it is a different name that hasn't been here before. So it kind of forces their hand to go out and make a move. So to me, the positive was it was the GM saying, I'm not running this back because it hasn't worked in it. Not that it isn't going to work, but like I need to do something different. So to me, that was a positive of trading Middlestat was the GM admitting I ran it back, blew up in my face. I'm not blowing everything up, but I'm going to make some necessary tweaks. So to me, we'll see what happens in the offseason. Adams still needs to show that he can go identify the proper forward to bring in here. But at least to me, it was a step in the right direction for this front office saying we're going to try something different.
And it's a long-term discussion we can have later on, but you also got to think about it coming up on the horizon. Peterka's going to need a contract. Benson's going to need a contract. Kulich might need to come up. Roseanne might need to come up, barring any sort of trades. So you're looking at like those guys taking a bigger role in making that Middlestat trade to say, okay, these are the guys that are going to pick up the slack, even Peyton Krebs as well, moving up from the fourth line to the third line now. Like it just seems like moving a guy like Middlestat, it hurt, but now it's time for these other guys that are here to really step up and earn that next contract because they had so many guys around Middlestat's age, that were signed on long-term deals. So you didn't necessarily want to stop anybody else from being able to get into that top six forward group. So I just think it's an opportunity for everybody else to kind of step up and show that this 1 year outlier for regression from the top guys is something that's not going to be a long-term thing, and you hope that guys like Peterka and Benson and Kulich, when he comes up here, are going to be able to take that next step forward in their development with whatever coaching staff is here to be able to put them in those positions to be successful and develop into the players that Sabres fans and the scouts and the GM have taken them, and they're top-end players for a reason that were taken the first round of the draft. So I just think it's a better opportunity for everybody else, I guess, within the group to make sure that they're doing all the right things going into next year.
Yeah, like I said, to me it was necessary. It was necessary because I said it all along. I was like, for anyone who wants a major shakeup in this forward group, the only way that's going to happen is if Middlestat is gone because everyone else was locked in long term or on their entry level deal. Middlestat was kind of in that no man's land where he was on a bridge deal, was due up a new contract, and was Adams going to commit to him for 7 years like Middlestat probably wanted? And Middlestat had probably earned, let's be honest, Middlestat has been very good the last 2 years. He's earned a long-term, nice, healthy contract. But if the Sabres had locked him into that, well, the next two pieces were Quinn and Peterka, who were not on long-term deals. What are you going to do? You're going to trade one of them? I can't see that happening because the Sabres, as good as their young prospects are, the Sabres were really, really desperate for NHL wingers, and that's what those two are. Like Jeff Skinner next year, again, this is all long-term stuff, but Jeff Skinner, it's time to start lessening his role a little bit, and hopefully, I think Quinn and Peterka are ready to step up and take that. So you don't want to lose those two guys. So I think it was just a necessary move that opened up, obviously it made the forwards worse in the intermediate because, you lost your third line center, who, let's face it, is probably a top six center in the NHL. That's what Colorado's going to be using him as. It's what they have been using him as, and he's played really well for them. So it was a necessary move. It's good for this team going forward because it's sink or swim for a guy like Peyton Krebs, who I really do want to see work out because I do love the player. I do love the guy that's bought in, not complained about being a fourth line center when he probably had a little bit more skill set than that. So I want to see him succeed, but at the end of the day, if he doesn't step up and fill that role, at least there is an opening now where it forces Kevin Adams to be aggressive and go fill that role.
Final thoughts as we wrap up the show, Austin. I mean, they've got the game against Ottawa tonight. Yeah. Got New Jersey, Toronto. Realistically here, by the next time we record, they're going to have a couple games left in the season, if that. So, I mean, I guess I get all the way up until, let's say, the Detroit game. The final Detroit game, that might be the final sword in the coffin, I guess you could say, by then, if it hasn't already been, which is going to be the title of this episode, most likely. But Sunday, April 7th, we'll say, that game against Detroit. We'll probably record the day after that. What are you hoping to see from this group and then those next 7 games?
What am I hoping to see? Just show some fight. Go out and make life difficult for other teams, at least, like, I don't know. Like, you win the next 3, which are all winnable games, let's be honest. Ottawa and New Jersey are very winnable games. Buffalo plays Toronto well no matter what their record is. So if you somehow win the next three, again, miracle to make the playoffs, but you win the next three, then you still have Detroit and Washington twice. Maybe you make it a little bit more interesting than it is. Maybe you can kind of get to within that, 3-4 point range and at least, give us the smallest bit of hope just to, probably rip it away from us at the end of the season here. But if this team wants to, kind of leave any lasting positive impression the rest of the year, you have 10 games left. I don't know, go 8-2 and at least give some semblance of positivity to the fans, because I don't know, maybe it's something we'll talk about in the offseason, but the fans and the team, the disconnect feels like it's starting to swing back to, the tank era, which is not good for anyone involved.
No, absolutely. And just give us something to talk about, essentially.
Yeah.
Beat Toronto, please. That's number one. Toronto's coming in town. It's going to be Leafs Nation's going to cross the border. Just beat them, please, because we all know what
Canada.
that's like. Yep. Oh, that would be fantastic, and maybe that'd be uplifting for the group, being able to beat a team like Toronto with all those home fans in your building, Hockey Night in Canada, national audience. Maybe that would be something that turns this group around. But regardless, from our sake, those are always games we circle on the calendar as well, just to have nice peace and quiet here in Southern Ontario, where we're based in Leafs Nation.
And just so everyone knows, at the time of the end of this recording, 2 minutes left. Detroit and Washington are tied. A 3-point game is essentially the worst case scenario, and it looks like that's what they're heading towards.
Well, thanks for the good news, Austin, at the end of the show, but realistically, the Sabres did that to themselves, so we're just kind of reporting
100%,
what they did. So that's going to wrap up another episode of Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Thank you to J&L Flooring, as always, for being the sponsor of this show. If you think you can get a better deal anywhere else, you don't know Jack. Contact our Niagara Falls location and begin your quality flooring project today. And for Austin Broad, my name is Brandon Caputo. Thank you to those today watching on the YouTube version on video, and to those listening today in on-demand audio. Until next time, talk to you again very soon. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.